Hello and welcome to our 10 Tampa Bay Earth Day special, where we'll show you how our planet is changing in response to carbon emissions, business practices, and our own daily habits.
Our goal is to bring you perspective on the impact of our changing climate, our wildlife, and our wallets.
And we're not just talking hypotheticals.
Yeah, we're taking deeper dives into the facts and where our planet could go from here if we continue following our current trajectory.
But there's still time to turn it all around. We'll show you the legislation in the works here in Florida and the simple tweaks you can make to your lifestyle.
So let's show you how you can stretch your green thumb and give back to our changing climate. But before we dive in, let's just quickly establish why we should care. That starts with the very nature of our planet in space.
Technically, we live in a massive greenhouse. Life on Earth depends on energy from the sun. As that sunlight reaches the Earth, some energy is reflected back into space, while some is absorbed and released as heat. However, most of that heat is then trapped by greenhouse gases, further warming our planet. While the Earth's climate naturally goes through cycles and fluctuations, human activities have only made the concentration of greenhouse gases worse. Think about the fossil fuels we burn, land clearing through deforestation, even fertilizer use. They all emit higher amounts of heat-trapping pollutants into our atmosphere.
The beauty that surrounds us is at a critical point of possible irreversible consequences. The impacts of climate change on land, overhead, and along all 8,436 miles of our beautiful coast are here now. The Florida Peninsula has warmed more than 1 degree Fahrenheit in just the last century. Rising temperatures across the globe are melting the Earth's ice caps, causing rising sea levels literally in our backyard. The tide gauge right here in St. Petersburg has risen more than an average of 8.5 inches since 1947.
As time goes on, the sea level isn't just rising at a uniform rate, it's accelerating. So it's rising faster and faster. And over the next 30 years, we're going to see another foot.
We're talking possible continued rise between 10.9 and 20.04 inches in St. Pete by 2050, according to a federal interagency task force. Anything higher than that will threaten downtown St. Petersburg. Rising sea level submerges wetlands and dry land, erodes our beautiful beaches, exacerbates flooding, which threatens our coastal infrastructure, our roads, homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, the framework of a fully functioning society. High tide flooding may seem like a low impact event right now, but our risk to these events is increasing by the day.
We expect that the number of high tide flooding events we're going to see will increase by almost a factor of 10 by the 2030s.
Oceans are not only rising, but they're heating up.
The climate is changing now at a rate that far exceeds individual species' abilities to adapt or to evolve. And so the ability of a species to tolerate higher temperature, different humidity, those types of things is likely not going to happen.
Tiny algae that live inside corals and provide them food are being killed off by rising water temperatures. This loss of algae weakens corals and can eventually kill them, commonly known as coral bleaching, wreaking havoc on the entire marine ecosystem.
So we already have about 130 species of all of the 1,000 species we have in Florida that are already threatened with extinction. And about half of those are further threatened by sea level rise.
From the small to the very big, rising ocean and air temperatures are making the most dangerous hurricanes even more intense. Our oceans are literally being injected with more fuel for hurricanes to strengthen and strengthen rapidly, leading to an increased threat of catastrophic supercharged winds, higher storm surge that now is reaching farther inland than ever before. Because of climate change, Florida's summertime thunderstorms are also more intense. While the amount of rainfall in the state hasn't increased all that much in the last century, when it does rain, it pours, and more rain in a shorter period of time increases the chance for inland flooding. That domino effect works its way through our waterways and back into the ocean. In fact, it's that runoff that picks up the nutrients from the land that can exacerbate harmful algal blooms like red tide. Recently, the governor's task force to address the state's algal bloom crisis concluded that without hard work and careful planning, adverse human health impacts and widespread wildlife mortality would most likely worsen because of climate change and Florida's growing population. The numbers are clear. The Earth is hotter. Since 1895, Florida has warmed about 0.2 degrees Fahrenheit per decade, but that rate of warming is increasing. Since 1945, the average temperature in Tampa has increased by over 3 degrees, with the majority of that warming occurring during the overnights. And here's the thing. Heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the United States, with an average of 143 heat-related deaths each year. Latest predictions show that as the Earth continues to warm, that number could increase to 1,000 deaths annually by 2040. Climate change's impact on Florida has already happened, but there's still time to hold back the worst of its potential impacts.
That warmth in our atmosphere plays a huge role in heating our oceans, which directly affects how active our hurricane seasons are.
The start date this year, June 1st, as usual. Now, to help make hurricane projections, we look at things like water temperatures in the Atlantic, do we have an El Nino or La Nina pattern, and we even look at monsoon forecasts over Africa. This upcoming season, it does look like it will be slightly above average. Normally we see 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 of those become major Category 3 hurricanes or larger. But this year, probably going to end up somewhere around 20 named storms. It does look to stay below the record-breaking season of 2020, when the Atlantic hurricane season saw 30 named storms, 14 hurricanes, and 7 of those became major hurricanes.
Florida is spending more money than ever on environmental resilience projects. The state has awarded more than $400 million through the Resilient Florida Grant Program.
That money was put towards helping communities fight the impact of flooding and storm surge. And after this year's legislative session, some more changes are on the way.
Most states are not prepared and do not have any action plans for dealing with climate change, but Florida is getting on the path. Florida lawmakers passed a bill to create a resiliency office under the governor. It's charged with prioritizing resilience projects. The bill does a couple of other key things. The Department of Environmental Protection has to assess statewide flood vulnerability and sea level rise data. The Department of Transportation is tasked with developing a resilience action plan for highways based on the conditions. Projects show different parts of Florida could see a sea level rise of 1 to 11 feet over the next 100 years. When it comes to making sure Florida's more than 1,300 golf courses are ready for you to tee off, lawmakers are making sure they're certified for best management practices with the help of the Turfgrass Science Program at the University of Florida. DEP will certify courses. Bobby Jones Golf Club in Sarasota has been part of a big $20 million renovation. Not only is it surrounded by water, the course would often flood. Now it's getting a redesign to prevent that from happening. If crews take proper care of the greens at all of the state's fairways, they can help keep runoff with nutrients out of our waterways and reduce the use of fertilizers which emit greenhouse gases.
The golf course certification is good for 4 years, and to renew it, the team will need continuing education, which includes more time to learn about the best practices for using fertilizer.
You can learn more about the legislation and how it impacts the coastline and the greens in our story at 10tampabay.com.
It's always, well, what can the consumer do? And that's a valid, legitimate question. But everyone forgets, well, yeah, because they make it easy for us.
Still ahead, from bags to bottles, plastic is in almost everything we use. But the problem with plastic goes beyond hurting wildlife, how it can impact human health as well.
Plus, from pollution to fertilizer runoff, we're playing a role in how climate change impacts wildlife, what you can do to help mitigate the effects on the ecosystem.
Welcome back to our Changing Climate Earth Day special, where certified meteorologists show you how the push and pull between our human footprint and Mother Nature is hurting our planet, and the simple steps you can practice daily to help stretch your green thumb. Think back to March of 2020. Former President Donald Trump had declared COVID-19 a national emergency. When that announcement came out, how many of you left your house, took a road trip, or jumped on a plane? Whatever your answer is, according to a NASA study, enough people went into lockdown to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 5.4% that year. All of that time spent inside helped our animals thrive outside. Let's break down why our most vulnerable species are being threatened. The impact of our changing climate extends to the countless species of animals and marine ecosystems on our planet. In a nutshell, rising temperatures are lowering the survival rates of various species due to changes that lead to less food, less reproduction, and interfering with their habitat. Combine that with human-caused impacts to the environment like littering, pollution, and drilling for oil, and you're talking about an ongoing crisis to various habitats across the globe. A study from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that 1/3 of wildlife on this planet could become extinct by 2070 due to climate change. Some of the species currently considered most vulnerable, according to the World Wildlife Fund, include African and Asian elephants, the monarch butterfly, polar bears, mountain gorillas, and green sea turtles, which are typically found in subtropical and warmer waters across the planet. And Florida has one of the largest numbers of green sea turtle nests in the western Atlantic, according to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. But habitats for turtles and other marine life have been threatened in more ways than one.
Well, fundamentally, we're putting too many nutrients into Florida's ocean and coasts. That's too much nutrient pollution from agriculture, from residential sources, from commercial sources, from municipal sources. Across the board, we're simply putting in too much nitrogen and too much phosphorus.
Excess nitrogen and phosphorus can cause an overgrowth of algae in a short period of time. We call them algal blooms. These blooms consume oxygen and block sunlight from underwater plants, making it impossible for certain species to survive. Then there's red tide, which we all know too well along the Gulf Coast. And while red tide is a naturally occurring event, that warm, nutrient-rich water is only further aggravated by our actions.
It's human impacts that are making red tides worse. It's human impacts that are making blue-green algal events worse. And warming water from climate change is making these harmful algal blooms worse. It's like pouring gasoline on an already existing fire.
And it's not just algal blooms that are a concern. Our changing climate has a direct impact on the seafood we eat.
The Gulf of Mexico is on average 3 degrees warmer than in previous years. And that has all kinds of impacts on things like fisheries. Fish travel throughout the Gulf based on the temperature of the water. The mackerel aren't coming at the right times of year, the redfish aren't coming at the right times of year, and that's all because of a warming ocean.
This is why now, more than ever, it is crucial we limit single-use plastics, explore smarter energy options, and combat waste and pollution.
We need to make changes in our personal lives, we need to make changes at City Hall, we need to make changes in Tallahassee that improve water quality, that mitigate against a changing climate, and that remove marine debris from our coasts.
Marine debris, which is any kind of human-created waste, can not only cause harm to our marine and coastal wildlife, but it can damage habitats, interfere with navigational safety, cause economic loss to our fishing industries, as well as threaten our own health and safety. Let's take a cigarette butt, for example. It's fundamentally formed up of little tiny pieces of plastic. Once that plastic gets into the environment, it can break down and it can wreak havoc on the ecosystem, not only harming sea life, but also birds if they feed those cigarette butts to their babies.
Well, we're at an all-hands-on-deck moment for Florida's ocean and coasts, and we're at a crossroads, frankly, and people need to care.
Like Brooker said, we're at a crossroads right now when it comes to our changing climate, and it's up to us to turn over a new leaf for the next generations to come. So where do you come into all of this, and how can you help? It starts with something as simple as a water bottle. Our Bobby Deskins is here to talk about the plastic factor.
So what's the problem with plastics? They're in almost everything that we use, but Mother Nature is not a fan.
More than 300 million tons of plastic are produced every year. While most of that ends up in landfills, dumps, or simply just on the ground, at least 14 million tons of it ends up in our oceans. That's according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And for a state surrounded by water, we need to be extra mindful of its impact. Plastic pollution not only threatens ecosystems, but also human health.
If you consume organisms that already are loaded with the microplastics, we might actually get them inside.
Dr. Henry Alegria, a professor of chemistry at USF St. Pete, says that all comes down to microplastics.
In layman's terms, microplastics are plastics once they have been broken down to very, very small size.
Think about it this way. A larger piece of plastic, like all those Gasparilla beads that fall into the water every year, they'll break down over time into teeny tiny pieces. Then comes along a hungry fish that swallows it up. Then comes a fisherman who catches it, and next thing you know, it's on your dinner table, microplastics and all. But that's not the only way microplastics are getting into the water.
Microplastics are used in personal care products. Once people wash their faces or they discard the product, those are directly taken into the ecosystem.
Dr. Alegria was part of a research team that found 4 billion particles of microplastics just in Tampa Bay. The biggest offenders?
One is actually from laundering clothes. So a lot of the fabrics have these very fibrous plastics. When you do your laundry and that water gets discharged, it goes into water treatment plants. They remove most but not all, and then when that water gets discharged, let's say into Tampa Bay, you see those fibrous things. And then we also think fibrous types, they come from like fishing nets, fishing lines, ropes, which makes sense around Tampa Bay.
So what about our marine life?
Unfortunately, it's affecting all of our marine life, especially the sea turtles. A perfect example would be Stubby, who's one of our resident sea turtles, who was deemed non-releasable due to the fishing line entanglement, and she lost both front flippers.
Cassandra Starr, a sea turtle rehabilitation specialist at Clearwater Marine Aquarium, says that she's seen it all inside a turtle, from fishing lines to balloons.
So this is a plastic bag?
That's a plastic bag.
And to a turtle, that looks like what?
Jellyfish.
If ingested, gas could build up in the turtle, causing it to float. That makes it more susceptible to predators and boat strikes. So where do you come in?
Reduce your plastic use. So single-use plastic, that's a huge one. Reduce the amount of silverware, utensils that we use for eating, takeout containers. We could also buy in bulk. That's less plastic.
And that's not all.
We also have to focus on the producers of plastics and the people who do transportation.
This year, 175 United Nations member states agreed to create a legally binding treaty to end plastic pollution. They will meet over the next 2 years to come up with an agreement on how to put limits on the life cycle of plastics.
And just this year, scientists discovered microplastics in human blood for the first time. That comes from plastic bottles and plastic bags. Now think about what you use and where it all goes. You can find a simple list of everyday things you can do to reduce your use of plastics right now on 10tampabay.com.
Whether it's drilling, mining, or deforestation, a lot of habitat destruction actually comes from business practices, but there are more sustainable ways to reinvent the wheel.
Right now, momentum is picking up globally to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions, but getting to that point requires new, innovative, sustainable strategies, and for those strategies to be profitable in the long run. Like General Motors, which announced its goal of ending gasoline and diesel-powered cars by 2035. But it's not just big automakers. First-generation eco-friendly energy companies are performing at these same levels and even surpassing that of big tech like Amazon and Apple. These companies demonstrate that climate innovation is all about creating value and opportunity. According to consulting experts BCG, there are 4 different cost-effective ways companies can successfully innovate for our climate. They can invent, reimagine, reboot, or re-engineer. Companies like Uber reimagine, meaning they create a new business model to fulfill the customer's needs. Inventing is similar, but it takes that one step further by adding breakthrough technology. Likewise, rebooting improves the products by offering new tech, but it doesn't have to come up with a brand new business approach. It only improves upon it. Tesla is a great example of this. And re-engineering is similar in that it works towards better solutions, but it doesn't involve as much technology.
BCG analysts say companies should explore each quadrant to see what best fits its needs. And it adds, all these methods are equally important in achieving net zero by 2050. Impact to your wallet, how climate change is affecting your trips to the grocery store without you even knowing. Plus, where can you contribute? The best eco-friendly organizations here locally and across the Sunshine State.
Welcome back. The impact of climate change is not just environmental. You, the consumer, are also feeling the pinch in more ways than one. Here's how.
Everything is connected. Once you're out of alignment, it's very hard to get it back into alignment globally.
The pandemic brought unprecedented supply chain disruptions, leaving shelves empty and increasing prices on necessities.
Products being manufactured and or grown, however, they are not able to get to the right place at the right time, or they're not able to get packaged so they can get into the store.
And climate change is complicating things even further by putting food production at risk. Extreme weather events are already impacting trade, travel, and agricultural production. A vast majority of the world's trade travels by sea.
If you lose a port, you're going to have to relocate those facilities. If you have more severe hurricanes and storms, you're at more risk of losing containers overboard or entire ships sinking. You're going to have to reroute to different transportation networks or switch from seaborne to other modes of transit.
All of which is disruptive, expensive, and harms prosperity. For instance, more intense floods from powerful storms increases damages to homes and businesses, and that has a cause and effect relationship with supply chains.
All the plywood and all the cement and all the construction materials and all the labor that goes rightly to help those people get back on their feet is not available to build a new house or expand the economy.
And while that may be great for plywood sales in the short run, that is material now being diverted to compensate for climate damage instead of economic growth. So, what's the supply chain solution? It's not an easy question to answer, but flexibility and a more geographically diverse supply are two crucial components.
They've realized that just relying on a supplier in Asia is by no means going to cut it, because weather, conflict, all sorts of problems arise.
When people say it's a choice, we either, we only have so much money, we have to spend it on adaptation, which is making ourselves more resilient, seawalls on in coastal areas, or higher ground, or putting your house up on stilts. Or we can invest in reducing our emissions. That's the wrong way to look at it.
Companies have limited financial resources, but when they multi-solve, they simultaneously build resilience into their operations and their way of living and cut greenhouse gas emissions. Supply shortages caused by more intense weather patterns is one of the reasons we're also seeing a spike in food inflation. Food prices are up 30% over the past year, according to the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. Hotter temperatures are impacting our state's agriculture. While our citrus trees and other fruits and vegetables thrive during winter months, it's the summer months that are problematic. Yield growth for various crops are on a decline, and without effective change, the declines are expected to continue. The heat has also slowed livestock productivity in our state, impacting Florida's $900 million industry. Some estimates forecast global yields could decline up to 30% by the year 2050. That's why awareness is key as the first step in taking action.
It's not too late. There's no time to waste. We've delayed and delayed and delayed, but it's not too late to take action to build a safer future.
Food for thought. Almost a quarter of the world's greenhouse gas emissions are due to the demand for food production. More and more companies are feeling the pressure to implement more eco-friendly practices.
If you're looking to invest in or maybe join a company that thinks with its green thumb, or apply for internships in the environmental field, there are a good number of options out there for you. Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful is a well-known local volunteer program, but here are 4 other companies making some buzz in Florida.
First up, we have the Sustainy Foundation. They're a nonprofit organization that promotes sustainability here in Tampa Bay. It offers resources for people wanting to work on eco-friendly projects, community programs, and it does other research as well. There's also Tampa Made Foods, a sourcing, processing, and marketing seafood business. The company is committed to making sure aquaculture can continue without harming ecosystems. Now over to Miami-Dade. On Peak Energy works with building owners to install and finance investments in energy-saving equipment. Lastly, Fleet Farming in Orlando is an agricultural program that can transform your lawn into an edible garden or a micro farm. Learn more about all of these companies with the complete list at 10tampabay.com. Stay with us. A final word when we come back.
Welcome back to our Changing Climate Earth Day special. We've run through a bunch of different topics today.
And we're making your first step towards eco-friendly living a whole lot easier with tons of resources on our webpage. And don't forget the bonus content on 10tampabay.com, including what greenhouse gas emissions really are and how plastics play a role in the problem.
Especially in our waterways, as well as how climate change impacts our animals and wildlife.
And not to mention our own wallets and the business models that help save our finances and the planet at the same time.
And how our hurricane seasons are becoming more active and what the Florida legislature is doing to help with flood and sea rise concerns.
Plus, how you can get involved to turn the tide, giving back to your backyard, your community projects, or even the state's power grid. Because it doesn't just stop here or now, it starts with you.
So from our backyard to yours, thank you for watching our 10 Tampa Bay Climate Change Special. And finally,
Happy Earth Day!